Welcome to a tour of my Damia Sage of Stone EDH deck. This deck is built around the theme of proliferate and actually doesn't really have anything to do with Damia. She is just here to provide color identity. So this deck came to be because I had been building a tribal Hydra deck, which I showed in a previous video, and I had been thinking about including some proliferate as a sub-theme in that deck, since most of the creatures are made entirely of +1/+1 counters. It seemed like a good mechanic to include, but over time, exploring some cards and talking to other players, kind of seemed like I wanted to break off proliferate and then explore it as a mechanic in its very own deck. So that's what I did. And here we are. So I know one question might be, why have I selected Damia as my commander? And the answer is honestly pretty simple. As I was looking at cards that I wanted to include in the deck, and everything was sort of coming together, it was becoming apparent that the deck's color identity was going to be green, blue, black. And at the time, there were actually hardly any commanders available. I know I must have built this deck somewhere around late 2013 or early 2014, and probably 2014 if I had to guess. All I know is that it was definitely before Khans of Tarkir came out, because I remember having this deck already built and then seeing Sidisi Brood Tyrant come out and this wedge getting the name Sultai. Anyway, yeah, there were very, very few commanders available for this color identity. And a fun fact, the original commander for this deck was not Damia at all. It was actually the Mimeoplasm. I was very excited about the prospect of having an ooze commander. That seemed very cool, but ultimately I decided to go with Damia. The other option, I think, would have been Vorosh, which actually plays into the deck theme pretty well. But I just thought maybe I wouldn't be casting my commander too incredibly often throughout a game. And it seemed like Damia could just sort of sit back and not do a whole lot until late in the game, when you've cast a lot of spells and really whittled your hand down. Then you could cast her and fill up your hand again and just sort of get that late game advantage. And I do know that there is a better option now. If I wanted to expand to include white, then Atraxa is an excellent commander for proliferate. Literally says it right on the card. I've been thinking about it, but adding another color is a pretty major overhaul, and I'm not sure. I'm a little undecided on this one. I really like the deck the way that it is. I feel a little attached to it, right? It's something that I created. But I do recognize that Atraxa would be a really valuable addition to this deck. And for good measure, I do have one still in the box, just waiting if I'm ever ready to make that change. Thank you for bearing with me through all of that. Let's get into the actual deck. So, first up, we have Damia, Sage of Stone. 4 green, blue, black. For a 4/4 legendary creature, Gorgon Wizard. Death Touch. Skip your draw step. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you have fewer than 7 cards in hand, draw cards equal to the difference. So, like I mentioned, this will mostly sit in the command zone until you're ready to cast it, and will just fill your hand back up every turn. It is otherwise a pretty large Death Touch creature, but I don't tend to put her into combat very often. I mostly just use her for the card draw. Moving on to the other creatures in the deck. The Mimeoplasm. 2 black, green, blue for a 0/0 legendary creature, Ooze. As the Mimeoplasm enters the battlefield, you may exile 2 creature cards from graveyards. If you do, it enters the battlefield as a copy of one of those cards, with a number of additional +1/+1 counters on it equal to the power of the other card. So just a useful way to get additional value from creatures in your graveyard, especially if there's any with an enter the battlefield effect that you want to repeat, or one with a particularly high power that you'd like to get back onto the battlefield. And I absolutely love this Wizard of Barge secret lair. Such cool imagery and bright colors. Yeah, this one really spoke to me. Ichor Rats. 1 black, black for a 2/1 creature, rat. Infect. When Ichor Rats enters the battlefield, each player gets a poison counter. So this card is here to kickstart the poison counters on each player so that I can proliferate more of those for my opponents. Skithrix the Blight Dragon. 3 black, black for a 4/4 legendary creature, dragon skeleton. Flying. Infect. Black. Skithrix the Blight Dragon gains haste until end of turn. Black, black. Regenerate Skithrix. So another useful card for getting poison counters onto players. And this one is really impactful if you can catch them by surprise and give it haste to fly in for a bunch of infect right away. Spinebiter. 4 green, green for a 3/4 creature, beast. Infect. You may have Spinebiter assign its combat damage as though it weren't blocked. Again, another way to punch through poison counters onto players. Hand of the Praetors. 3 black for a 3/2 creature, zombie. Infect. Other creatures you control with Infect get +1/+1. Whenever you cast a creature spell with Infect, target player gets a poison counter. Phyrexian Swarmlord. 4 green for a 4/4 creature, insect horror. Infect. At the beginning of your upkeep, put a 1/1 green insect creature token with Infect onto the battlefield for each poison counter your opponents have. Core Prowler. 4 for a 2/2 artifact creature, horror. Infect. When Core Prowler is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, proliferate. So this one comes to the table with both Infect and Proliferate, which is nice. Reaper of Sheldred. 4 black for a 2/5 creature, horror. Infect. Whenever a source deals damage to Reaper of Sheldred, that source's controller gets a poison counter. Phyrexian Hydra. 3 green for a 7/7 creature, Hydra. Infect. If damage would be dealt to Phyrexian Hydra, prevent that damage. Put a -1/-1 counter on Phyrexian Hydra for each 1 damage prevented this way. Corpsejack Menace. 2 black-green for a 4/4 creature, fungus. If 1 or more +1/+1 counters would be placed on a creature you control, twice that many +1/+1 counters are placed on it instead. So this helps bolster some proliferation of +1/+1 counters. Varal's the Scar-Striped. 1 black-green for a 2/2 legendary creature, troll warrior. Each creature card in your graveyard has scavenge. The scavenge cost is equal to its mana cost. Sacrifice another creature. Regenerate Varal's the Scar-Striped. This card is here to kickstart some +1/+1 counters on creatures and otherwise make use of creatures in the graveyard. Vorel of the Hullclade. 1 green-blue for a 1/4 legendary creature, human merfolk. Green-blue tap. For each counter on target artifact, creature, or land, put another of those counters on that permanent. This is a card that I definitely insisted on having in the deck, even though there's probably better options out there, or maybe it's a little underpowered in this deck. But this is actually a pretty sentimental card for me. This is from the deck that I actually learned how to play Magic on, so I just had to include him. Thrumming Bird. 1 blue for a 1/1 creature, bird horror. Flying. Whenever Thrumming Bird deals combat damage to a player, proliferate. Flux Channeler. 2 blue for a 2/2 creature, human wizard. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, proliferate. Evolution Sage. 2 green for a 3/2 creature, elf druid. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, proliferate. Yawgmoth. Thran Physician. 2 black for a 2/4 legendary creature, human cleric. Protection from humans. Pay 1 life. Sacrifice another creature. Put a -1/-1 counter on up to 1 target creature and draw a card. Black. Discard a card. Proliferate. So, useful both for proliferate and getting -1/-1 counters onto opponent's creatures. Herd Baloth. 3 green for a 4/4 creature, beast. Whenever 1 or more +1/+1 counters are put on Herd Baloth, you may create a 4/4 green beast creature token. This one definitely gets out of hand sometimes if you're able to reliably put counters onto it. Just spits out a bunch of 4/4 beasts. Ob Nixilis. Unshackled. 4 black for a 4/4 legendary creature, demon. Flying. Trample. Whenever an opponent searches their library, that player sacrifices a creature and loses 10 life. Whenever another creature dies, put a +1/+1 counter on Ob Nixilis Unshackled. This one is just a nuisance for opponents to have to remember. Shapers of Nature. 1 green for a 3/3 creature, Merfolk Shaman. 3 green. Put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. 2 blue. Remove a +1/+1 counter from a creature you control. Draw a card. So mostly here for the card draw ability. Spikeweaver. 2 green, green for a 0/0 spike. Spikeweaver comes into play with 3 +1/+1 counters on it. 2. Remove a +1/+1 counter from Spikeweaver. Put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. 1. Remove a +1/+1 counter from Spikeweaver. Creatures deal no combat damage this turn. This card is here just to sit on the battlefield and accumulate +1/+1 counters, and then hand them off to other creatures so that they can become targets for Proliferate. Eternal Witness. 1 green, green for a 2/1 creature, human shaman. When Eternal Witness enters the battlefield, you may return target card from your graveyard to your hand. Boneyard Lurker. 2 black, green for a 4/4 creature, nightmare beast. Mutate. 2 hybrid black, green, hybrid black, green. Whenever this creature mutates, return target permanent card from your graveyard to your hand. Kind of a redundant Eternal Witness effect. And our last creature is Progenitor Mimic. 4 green, blue for a 0/0 creature, shapeshifter. You may have Progenitor Mimic enter the battlefield as a copy of any creature on the battlefield, except it gains at the beginning of your upkeep. If this creature isn't a token, put a token onto the battlefield that's a copy of this creature. So this is an all-around useful card for creating a steady flow of creatures every turn, especially if the creature has an enters the battlefield ability that you want to repeat, or if an opponent has a particularly powerful creature that you want to copy and keep copying. Definitely a good way to stabilize and gain some advantage. So that will do it for the creatures. Next up, we have instants and sorceries. Demonic Tutor. 1 black sorcery. Search your library for 1 card and take it into your hand. Reshuffle your library afterward. Regrowth. 1 green for a sorcery. Bring any card from your graveyard to your hand. We are onto the land ramp spells. Circuitous Root. 3 green for a sorcery. Search your library for up to 2 basic land cards and or gate cards. Put them onto the battlefield tapped. Then shuffle your library. Reap and sow. 3 green for a sorcery. Choose 1. Destroy target land, or search your library for a land card. Put that card into play, then shuffle your library. Entwine 1 green. Migration Path. 3 green sorcery. Search your library for up to 2 basic land cards. Put them onto the battlefield tapped. Then shuffle your library. Cycling 2. I really like that this spell has cycling. Makes it a lot more useful at different points in the game. Kodama's Reach. 2 green sorcery arcane. Search your library for 2 basic land cards. Reveal those cards and put 1 into play tapped and the other into your hand. Then shuffle your library. Cultivate. 2 green sorcery. Search your library for up to 2 basic land cards. Reveal those cards and put 1 onto the battlefield tapped and the other into your hand. Then shuffle your library. Moving on to the removal cards for this deck. Death Sprout. 1 black, green. Instant. Destroy target creature. Search your library for a basic land card. Put it onto the battlefield tapped. Then shuffle your library. Hero's Downfall. 1 black, instant. Destroy target creature or planeswalker. Always handy to have some planeswalker removal. Doomblade. 1 black, instant. Destroy target non-black creature. Go for the Throat. 1 black, instant. Destroy target non-artifact creature. Although the last couple removal spells are conditional, the inexpensive mana cost makes it worth it, and it's rarely ever a problem. Putrefy. 1 black green instant. Destroy target artifact or creature. It can't be regenerated. Beast Within. 2 green instant. Destroy target permanent. Its controller puts a 3/3 green beast creature token onto the battlefield. I love that this card gets any permanent. Sultai Charm. Black, green, blue. Instant. Choose 1. Destroy target monocolored creature. Destroy target artifact or enchantment. Draw 2 cards, then discard a card. Damnation. 2 black, black. Sorcery. Destroy all creatures. They can't be regenerated. Classic board wipe. And then building off of that one is Decree of Pain. 6 black, black. Sorcery. Destroy all creatures. They can't be regenerated. Draw a card for each creature destroyed this way. Cycling. 3 black, black. When you cycle Decree of Pain, all creatures get -2, -2 until end of turn. So, quite a bit more expensive than Damnation, but also a bit more versatile. Rishkar's Expertise. 4 green, green. Sorcery. Draw cards equal to the greatest power among creatures you control. You may cast a card with converted mana cost 5 or less from your hand without paying its mana cost. Inspiring Call. 2 green instant. Draw a card for each creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it. Those creatures gain indestructible until end of turn. Tainted Strike. Black instant. Target creature gets +1/+0 and gains infect until end of turn. So, nice little combat trick here for punching through some poison counters. Wipe Away. 1 blue, blue, instant, split second, return target permanent to its owner's hand. And this is a fun one. Cyclonic Rift. 1 blue for an instant. Return target non-land permanent you don't control to its owner's hand. Overload 6 blue. Dissolve 1 blue, blue, instant. Counter target spell, scry 1. Sublime Epiphany, 4 blue, blue, instant. Choose 1 or more. Counter target spell, counter target activated or triggered ability. Return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. Create a token that's a copy of target creature you control. Target player draws a card. A really versatile spell. Does a little bit of everything and not too hard to get 6 mana worth of value out of it. Moving on to some proliferate spells. Fuel for the cause. 2 blue, blue, instant. Counter target spell, then proliferate. Tezzeret's Gambit. 3 Phyrexian blue. Sorcery. Draw 2 cards, then proliferate. Spread the sickness. 4 black. Sorcery. Destroy target creature, then proliferate. Courage in Crisis. 2 green. Sorcery. Put a +1/+1 counter on target creature, then proliferate. Steady Progress. 2 blue, instant. Proliferate. Draw a card. Grim Affliction. 2 black, instant. Put a -1/-1 counter on target creature, then proliferate. Contentious Plan. 1 blue, sorcery. Proliferate. Draw a card. Pretty straightforward there. Just using the proliferate to grow my own creatures, shrink opponents' creatures, and ideally adding some poison counters onto opponents. Our last spell for this section, Increasing Savagery. 2 green, green for a sorcery. Put 5 +1/+1 counters on target creature. If Increasing Savagery was cast from a graveyard, put 10 +1/+1 counters on that creature instead. Flashback. 5 green, green. So kind of a ridiculous card, but a lot of fun if it's able to resolve. So that's it for the instants and sorceries. Next up, we are onto the enchantments. Inexorable Tide. 3 blue, blue for an enchantment. Whenever you cast a spell, proliferate. So, an extremely useful enchantment here. Primal Vigor. 4 green for an enchantment. If one or more tokens would be put onto the battlefield, twice that many of those tokens are put onto the battlefield instead. If one or more +1/+1 counters would be placed on a creature, twice that many +1/+1 counters are placed on that creature instead. Really useful for getting double the proliferation effect if I'm doing +1/+1 counters on my creatures. Corrupted Conscience. 3 blue, blue for an enchantment. Aura. Enchant creature. You control enchanted creature. Enchanted creature has infect. Bred for the Hunt. 1 green, blue enchantment. Whenever a creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it deals combat damage to a player, you may draw a card. Rites of Flourishing. 2 green for an enchantment. At the beginning of each player's draw step, that player draws an additional card. Each player may play an additional land on each of their turns. Nice card to help everyone at the table out. Love to see it. Burgeoning. Green enchantment. Whenever an opponent plays a land, you may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. So definitely helpful to get this out as soon as possible so that you can ramp quickly. But this is also really helpful later in the game when you have Damia out so that you can get rid of extra lands from your hand and free up more space for Damia to fill up for you the next time your turn starts. Contagion Engine. 6 for an artifact. When Contagion Engine enters the battlefield, put a -1/-1 counter on each creature target opponent controls. 4 tap, proliferate, then proliferate again. So yeah, love this card. Great way to continue proliferating whenever you need to. Grafted Exoskeleton. 4 for an artifact, equipment. Equipped creature gets +2/+2 and has Infect. Whenever Grafted Exoskeleton becomes unattached from a permanent, sacrifice that permanent. Equip 2. So just the one equipment in this deck, and the last few artifacts are for mana. Chromatic Lantern. 3 for an artifact. Lands you control have tap, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. Tap, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. Soul Ring. 1 for an artifact. Tap, add 2 colorless mana to your mana pool. This ability is played as an interrupt. And our last artifact, Darksteel Ingot. 3 for an artifact. Indestructible. Tap, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. So that'll do it for the artifacts. Last up, we have lands. Command Tower. Land. Tap, add 1 mana of any color in your commander's color identity. Opulent Palace. Land. Opulent Palace enters the battlefield tapped. Tap, add black, green, or blue to your mana pool. Tainted Wood. Land. Tap, add 1 colorless to your mana pool. Tap, add black or green to your mana pool. Play this ability only if you control a swamp. Temple of Malady. Land. Temple of Malady enters the battlefield tapped. When Temple of Malady enters the battlefield, scry 1. Tap, add black or green to your mana pool. Woodland Cemetery. Land. Woodland Cemetery enters the battlefield tapped, unless you control a swamp or a forest. Tap, add black or green to your mana pool. Overgrown Tomb. Land, swamp, forest. As Overgrown Tomb enters the battlefield, you may pay 2 life. If you don't, Overgrown Tomb enters the battlefield tapped. Jungle Hollow. Land. Jungle Hollow enters the battlefield tapped. When Jungle Hollow enters the battlefield, you gain 1 life. Tap, add black or green to your mana pool. Tainted Isle. Land. Tap, add 1 colorless to your mana pool. Tap, add blue or black to your mana pool. Play this ability only if you control a swamp. Temple of Deceit. Land. Temple of Deceit enters the battlefield tapped. When Temple of Deceit enters the battlefield, scry 1. Tap, add blue or black to your mana pool. Drowned Catacomb. Land. Drowned Catacomb enters the battlefield tapped, unless you control an island or a swamp. Tap, add blue or black to your mana pool. Watery Grave. Land, island, swamp. As Watery Grave enters the battlefield, you may pay 2 life. If you don't, Watery Grave enters the battlefield tapped. Dismal Backwater. Land. Dismal Backwater enters the battlefield tapped. When Dismal Backwater enters the battlefield, you gain 1 life. Tap, add blue or black to your mana pool. Temple of Mystery. Land. Temple of Mystery enters the battlefield tapped. When Temple of Mystery enters the battlefield, scry 1. Tap, add green or blue to your mana pool. Hinterland Harbor. Land. Hinterland Harbor enters the battlefield tapped, unless you control a forest or an island. Tap, add green or blue to your mana pool. Breeding Pool. Land, Forest, Island. As Breeding Pool enters the battlefield, you may pay 2 life. If you don't, Breeding Pool enters the battlefield tapped. Vivid Creek. Land. Vivid Creek enters the battlefield tapped with 2 charge counters on it. Tap, add blue to your mana pool. Tap, remove a charge counter from Vivid Creek. Add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. This land is a good target for Proliferate as well. Ideally, it'll never run out of its counters if you're able to keep at least 1 on and then keep proliferating. Oran Reef, the Vastwood. Land. Oran Reef, the Vastwood enters the battlefield tapped. Tap. Add green to your mana pool. Tap. Put a +1/+1 counter on each green creature that entered the battlefield this turn. Useful for kickstarting some +1/+1 counters on your creatures. Urborg, Tomb of Yawgmoth. Legendary land. Each land is a swamp in addition to its other types. Rogue's Passage. Land. Tap. Add 1 to your mana pool. 4. Tap. Target creature is unblockable this turn. This definitely ends games if you're able to shove enough infect creatures through here, or get Damia through for enough commander damage. So definitely a dangerous land for your opponents when you have it, and sort of represents an inevitability unless they can deal with it. Karn's Bastion. Land. Tap. Add colorless. 4. Tap. Proliferate. Another recurring source of Proliferate. And our last non-basic land, Alchemist's Refuge. Land. Tap. Add 1 to your mana pool. Green, blue, tap. You may cast non-land cards as though they had flash. And I'll just flip through the basic lands quickly here. Nothing too special about them, just whatever I had on hand at the time. And that will do it. Thank you so much for joining me for this tour of my Damia Sage of Stone EDH deck. And now I'm curious to know, do you have a deck similar to this, built around the proliferate mechanic? Or maybe you have a Damia deck that is based around a different theme? I think the deck that she came in was more of a graveyard recursion strategy, but I'm not really sure. I've never seen or played with that deck. As always, I'm happy to welcome any questions or comments you have. Did anything strike an idea for you? Or is there something maybe I should consider putting in here? My EDH decks are kind of ever evolving and receiving new cards as they come out, or as I find new and interesting things to try out. And yeah, I guess I'm curious to know, do you think I should switch the commander like we talked about at the beginning of the video? What do you think about that? But anyway, thank you for sticking with me through the whole video. Of course, please make sure you subscribe and come back every Monday and Friday for new Magic the Gathering ASMR videos. I hope you have a wonderful day.